the kitchen sink, and the water just won't go down. It pools around the drain, creeping lower a little at a time, and there's that smell rising up from underneath, sour, faintly rotten, the smell of everything that's been washed down there for weeks. You crank the hot tap, and it helps for about an hour. You pour something bright blue and harsh into the drain. It foams up dramatically, and you cross your fingers. A week later, you're standing at that same slow, smelly sink, wondering how many more foaming bottles it'll take before the day it stops draining altogether. Here's the part nobody explains to you. A clog isn't a single event. It builds up gradually, grease, food particles, and soap residue cooling and sticking to the inside wall of the pipe, somewhere you'll never see it happen. By the time water is sitting in your sink, that pipe has been narrowing for months already. Which means the fix isn't some harsh chemical you dump in after the damage is done. The real fix is a small, cheap habit that keeps the inside of that pipe clean so grease never gets the chance to build up in the first place. Keep the walls clean, and there's simply nothing left for a clog to form out of. I'm Nomi Yoder, and I run my household the traditional way, the way it's been passed down for generations. Before I show you how this works, one quick note. If you want the fuller version of how I manage a household on a fraction of what most families spend, I've put the complete method together for anyone who's interested. I'll leave that where you can find it. Now, here's exactly how this works. We're making small cleaning cubes that live in your freezer, ready to drop down the drain whenever you need one. And then I'll walk you through the hot water flush that pairs with them, which is honestly the part doing most of the real scrubbing. Start with the cubes. Take half a lemon, cut it into pieces, and pick out the seeds. Seeds turn things bitter, so it's worth the extra 30 seconds. Drop the lemon pieces, peel included, into a blender or a bowl you can mix by hand. Don't skip the peel. Most of the grease-cutting power and that clean, bright smell actually live in the oils inside the skin, not the flesh. Add just enough water to cover the lemon, no more than that. You want this concentrated, not diluted. Then stir in 2 tablespoons of plain table salt. The salt is your scrubbing agent. It's gritty, so it works like a natural scouring powder, and salt on its own has real cleaning and deodorizing power. Older generations kept a box of it right by the sink for exactly this kind of job, long before every task had its own dedicated bottle. The lemon handles the grease cutting and leaves the drain smelling fresh instead of sour. Blend or beat it all together thoroughly, a full minute at least, until the lemon has broken down completely and the salt is worked evenly through the mixture. Then strain it. Pour the whole thing through a kitchen strainer to separate out the pulp and keep the liquid. That bright, salty, lemon-scented liquid is what you're after. Press the leftover pulp against the strainer with the back of a spoon to squeeze out every last bit of usable liquid. The pulp itself goes into your compost or garden, never down the drain, since that's exactly the kind of debris we're trying to keep out of the pipe to begin with. To the strained liquid, add a single drop of dish soap and stir it in gently, just 1 drop, enough to help it cut through grease without foaming over the tray. Pour the mixture into an ice cube tray and place it in the freezer until it's fully solid, anywhere from a few hours to overnight. Once frozen, pop the cubes out and store them in a bag or container in the freezer, freeing up your tray so you can start a new batch whenever your supply runs low. That's your entire stock made, a tray of grease-cutting, drain-freshening cubes on hand whenever you need one, for the cost of half a lemon and a spoonful of salt. Pennies and a few minutes of effort. Here's a quick word on why freezing it matters, because it's a clever bit of logic worth understanding. A liquid poured straight down the drain disappears in a second. It rushes past the grease far too fast to do much good. A cube, though, has to sit in the drain opening and melt gradually. And the whole time it's melting, it's slowly releasing that salt and lemon right where it's needed, letting the acid and the grit scrub away over a full minute or 2 instead of a single flash. The cold also firms up the surrounding grease, giving the salt something solid to actually scrape against. It's the difference between splashing a bucket of water on a dirty step versus laying a damp cloth over a stain and letting it work. Slow and targeted beats fast and gone, every single time. Now here's how you actually use them, and this is where the real work happens, so pay attention. Drop 1 frozen cube down the drain. Then, and this is the step almost everyone skips, set a bucket or basin in the sink, fill it with very hot water, and pour the entire thing down the drain in one steady, continuous pour right after the cube goes in. Here's why you need both steps. The cube goes down cold, and as it melts, the salt and lemon ride along the inner wall of the pipe, loosening and cutting into the grease stuck there. The cold also firms that grease up, so the salt has something solid to work against. Then the surge of hot water right behind it melts the loosened grease and carries the whole mess down and out before it has a chance to cool and re-stick further down the line. The cube does the scrubbing. The hot water does the flushing. Skip either half, and you're only doing half the job. A cube with no flush just loosens grease and leaves it sitting there. Hot water with no cube just warms the grease up before it resettles. Together, they lift it and carry it away completely. A quick word about that hot water, because it matters more than most people assume. You want it genuinely hot, the hottest your tap produces, or a kettle straight off the boil. And you want real volume behind it, a full bucket, not a small cupful, poured all at once with some force and heat behind it. A slow trickle of warm water does almost nothing. It cools before it's traveled even a foot down the pipe. A full bucket of properly hot water comes down like a small flood and holds its heat long enough to reach well down the line, carrying loosened grease past the bends where it tends to collect. If you've got a double sink, run this on both sides. If there's a garbage disposal involved, run it briefly first to clear whatever's sitting in it, then drop the cube and pour. It's a simple process, but doing it properly is the difference between a drain that smells better for a single day and one that genuinely runs clear week after week. Do this about twice a week. That rhythm is really the whole secret, not one heroic deep clean a year, but a small, steady habit that never gives the grease a chance to win. Twice weekly, a cube and a bucket of hot water, and the inside of that pipe stays as clean as the day it was installed. Ordinarily, that food debris and grease is quietly building up along the inner wall where you can't see it, a little thicker every single day. This habit is what stops it from ever getting a foothold in the first place. Think of it like wiping down the stove right after cooking instead of letting the splatters bake on for a month. A quick wipe while it's fresh is nothing, but baked-on grime becomes a genuine battle. The drain works exactly the same way. It's just hidden, which is precisely why people forget about it until it forces them to remember. Pick 2 days that are easy to stick to. A Monday and a Thursday, say, or whatever days you already do your bigger cooking, and attach the habit to something you're already doing so you don't have to remember it fresh each time. Once it becomes routine, it stops feeling like a chore and just becomes one more small thing a well-run household does automatically. While we're on the subject and you've already got hot water and the habit going, here's a second use for the same principle, because grease is grease no matter where it's hiding. You know that feeling when you wash a greasy pan or an oily plastic plate with regular soap, and it looks clean, but there's still that faint slick film once it dries? That's grease cold water, and soap alone couldn't fully lift. The same hot water cuts grease principle applies here too. Wash those greasy pans and plastic dishes in genuinely hot water, and that lingering film comes off properly. A plate that's truly grease-free is also a plate that isn't sending more grease down your drain the next time you rinse it. It all works together. While we're keeping things clean, here's one more, because it's the same philosophy of small upkeep beating big repairs, and this one's for the toilet tank, not the sink, so don't mix the two up. Over time, the inside of a toilet tank builds up hard, chalky limescale from the minerals naturally present in your water supply, and that buildup is exactly what makes the mechanism stiff and the bowl harder to keep clean. The fix follows the same logic, a regular, gentle habit. Drop a descaling or cleaning tablet made for this purpose into the tank and let it work in the standing water. It cleans the tank and actively fights that limescale buildup, so the whole system stays clean and runs smoothly without you ever having to scrub inside the tank by hand. A little effort regularly instead of a hard fight later. The same theme showing up in one more corner of the house. So, to pull it all together, make your lemon and salt cubes and keep a stock of them in the freezer. Twice a week, drop one down the drain and flush it with a full bucket of hot water. The cube scrubs, the hot water carries it away. Wash your greasy pans and plastic dishes in hot water so that lingering film comes off instead of feeding the drain further. And drop a descaling tablet into the toilet tank now, and then to keep limescale from taking hold. Small habits, every one of them, that keep a clean drain and a clean tank from ever turning into an expensive problem. Now let me tell you who'd rather you never learned any of this. Walk down the cleaning aisle at any store and look at the shelf of drain openers, the heavy jugs, the warning labels, the harsh chemicals that cost real money and burn if they touch your skin. Every single one of those products is designed for the day your drain has already failed. There's no profit in you keeping a drain, so clean it never clogs in the first place. Half a lemon, a spoonful of salt, and a bucket of hot water twice a week doesn't sell anyone a jug of drain cleaner. And a household that never hits that emergency never reaches for the expensive fix and never has to pay a plumber $100 to do what a bucket of hot water would have handled for free all along. Nobody's plotting this in a back room somewhere. Honestly, it's almost worse than a scheme, because a scheme could be exposed and dealt with. This is just a system that runs on its own momentum. Everything on that shelf is built around the clog, not around prevention. The bottle needs the blockage to exist. The entire industry is arranged around the bad day, because the bad day is the day you spend money, and a household that never has that bad day is a household that industry has no use for. Nobody sat down and designed it this way on purpose. It simply grew up around whatever sells, the same way water finds the lowest point without anyone directing it there. The old approach worked in the opposite direction entirely. There was no store to run to when something went wrong, so the trouble had to be prevented from ever starting, because once it did start, there was no jug waiting on a shelf to fix it. So you kept the small things maintained. You scoured the pipe before it ever narrowed, the same way you'd mend a small tear before it became a ruined garment, or oil a hinge before it had the chance to rust shut. It wasn't some special virtue. It was simply how you ran a household when keeping it running was entirely on you and nobody else. And here's the strange part. That careful old approach is actually cheaper now than it ever was back then, because now you're not just saving yourself the trouble, you're saving everything that shelf would have charged you to fix it. You can run your home the same way and walk right past that entire aisle, leaving it to sell its jugs to somebody else. So here's what I'd ask of you. Go make a tray of these cubes today, start the twice-a-week habit, and come back to the comments in a couple of weeks to tell me how your drain is running. Let me know if that sour smell is gone, whether the water's draining quickly again, and while you're at it, tell me where you're from and how old your plumbing is. Older homes tend to have older pipes, and I genuinely love hearing what kind of setup everyone's working with and where in the world you're writing from. I read every comment. Don't wait for a slow drain to start before you begin. The entire point of this habit is to start while the water is still running fast and clean during the easy season, before any trouble shows up at all. A pipe kept clean from the beginning never has a bad day. The cheapest repair is always the one you never had to make, because you kept up the small habit that made it unnecessary, and that's just as true of a kitchen drain as it is of nearly everything else worth maintaining in a home. I'll see you next time, when I'll show you how I keep the whole kitchen smelling fresh using nothing but what's already sitting in the pantry. Until then, go make your cubes and come back and tell me how that drain runs.